Hi, my name is Freudinger. I'm a sports performance intern coach at Marquette University in the summer 2019 class. So the sport that I have been assigned is motocross. Motocross is surprisingly actually about 100 years old. Really the developments have come in recent years with technology in relation to protective gear and how fast and powerful the bikes are. They are in an off-road circuit, and what's interesting is that this is going to be 30 minutes and then 2 laps on top of that. So it's fairly set time and repeat of the same track over that extension of the half-mile to mile-and-a-half, depending on which course you are on. So obviously, with the intensity that comes with riding on a bike and controlling this massive piece of machinery, you need to be prepared for the impact and the stamina that it takes to go 30 minutes nonstop. Now this is both physical and mental, and this is where it comes into the focus and reaction time. Unlike a lot of other sports where you have timeouts, breaks, refueling stations, this is going to go completely straight through. So a big thing to account for in the training is going to be not only maintaining physicality, able to get that heart rate up to that maximum capacity, but also to keep that relaxed state muscularly and mentally, able to account for turns and unexpected maneuvers. Another thing that this training plan is going to take into account for is that in the American Motocross Association circuit, which is over the course of about 16 weeks, this spans across the United States. So not only are you accounting for different terrains, but you need to account for travel. How are you getting your bike there? How are you getting yourself there? What kind of implements are you going to be able to bring with you on the road? So aside from the fact that this just looks like I went crazy with the highlighter, this is a bit of an overview of what we're looking at, with blue being our off-season, yellow being the in-season, in the middle a preseason, and a postseason. In this section, I considered in-season to be this 32 and 34 period, is all kind of like that final, so it goes based on point value. So if you don't make it through into here, it's not really like a tournament style setup or a postseason play, but I suppose from what I understand, you can still compete in this if you don't have enough points, but you're not actually going to pull away with the championship. So this is in a block style periodization where you're increasing weight, decreasing volume as you work into here, and then with preseason, adding more practice time on the bike, and then declining that off just to recover from the kinds of impacts that athletes are going to be seeing on the bike. So the first thing we have going through is our off-season. We're going to be focusing on plyometrics in the sense of not being necessarily explosive, because the athlete isn't actually going to be generating their own power. They're going to be controlling and redistributing the power that comes from the bike. So things that we will be using to implement this would be more of like drop landings and that sort of thing. Again, because of how the bike is structured, you're never really going to be holding a certain amount of weight on top of the athlete the entire period. So unilateral loading, either with dumbbells, resistance bands, anything that's going to create an instability that the athletes are going to have to use some kind of a rotational core or unilateral push-pull movement will be very helpful. So these are going to be distributed through in the weights in here. No balance instability, that may seem very vague. That it literally implies any sort of thing that's going to force the athlete to stabilize. It could be yoga, it could be paddleboarding. The type of athlete that usually gets involved with this is very dynamic, and really anyone who wants to be on a high-powered machine needs to be stimulated at all times. So there's definitely an emphasis on keeping yourself occupied and changing things up any way you can through skateboarding, balance and stability. It's kind of like a free-for-all in a sense of like pick what you want, but have it relate to increasing the presence of these two qualities here. Another big thing that I've included in here is gymnastics work. So you can get gymnastics work being simple as a push-up, pull-up. and increasing it all the way up to very difficult ring holds and ring pulls, such as seen in professional gymnasts. And the implements are often free, as in your own body, or very inexpensive and easy to travel with, which is good to consider with training in the off season when they may have a facility to work at, but that will translate into in season when they can be using the same or similar movements without disrupting too much of the schedule. For our focus, we mentioned through preventing boredom and assisting with body control. We also want to make sure that there is an emphasis on recovery. Any kinds of injuries you can think of, you can have while falling off of the bike, or just general compression injuries. A big one is going to be things that are dealing with the spine. So if you're not taking care of yourself in the off season, it's really going to show in season, not only with potentially even life-threatening injuries, but also performance and subsequent kind of generally just kind of wasting your time with competition at that point. Preseason is relatively short, as in-season is kind of long, so this would be the maximum phase of, we want the highest intensity and the lowest volume. This is usually when athletes, from what I understand, are going to be practicing between 6 to 10 hours a week. So you can get about 2 hours out of one kind of bike run at a time. That's 4 times the amount of a competition. So again, doing this in here, extra is going to translate into how they can work on the bike in a shorter 30-minute period of time. An emphasis we've got on is rotational core. So there's going to be, considering that the extremities are going to be hanging off the sides of the bike, and really the only thing centered on top of the bike is going to be the core. It's important to have this, the core piece, be able to move and pull the bike in the proper direction. So readiness assessment is what we're looking at. How we're going to measure what's going on with that is going to be in heart rate. So I'd like them to wear or kind of assess like what their heart rate's going on like in the previous season, and seeing if we can decrease that heart rate so that they can be in a more relaxed state to prevent things such as arm pump, general poor decision making while on the bike that could lead to disastrous consequences. So in season, this period of time, this 1, 2, 3, 4, these are days where they might be completely on the road and travel. So if they have access to their competition bike, that's great. They're going to be using gymnastics movements, pushes and pulls with body weight and such. Plyometrics are going to be kept extremely low at this time, as we don't want to overload with that kind of extra impact. Competition dates are all staged for Fridays in various places across the United States. And recovery and tissue work is going to be really important to just kind of hamper, so to speak, the body with all this extra massive amounts of forces that it's taking on. Yes, so accounting for travel and preparing for competition days. So this may be prehab and priming using cycle sprints that are easy to find at a hotel, or just generally easy to take a bike with you. And then maintaining the stamina, balance, increasing focus as they progress through the season, and then adjusting to injuries, any freak accidents that happen, tapering on or off based on what's going on in that. Postseason, again, this is really just going to be a complete shutdown. We want to really just assess what happened over the season. Are there any underlying fractures, tears, strains that need to be addressed before the athlete actually gets into next season, or if they choose to get into something, which most athletes do Supercross, so there really is no off season for them. Assessing damage, unloading the impact that's been on them, such as swimming, resisting, yoga, stuff that's very, very light on our joints. So yeah, as again I mentioned, most motocross athletes are participating in Supercross, so really planning an off season is not all that particular because it takes them through the whole year then. They're doing this constantly, and you may probably guess that there's not many very old people that are involved in this sport. It's very physical and expensive and dangerous. So, comments or questions?
Any questions?
So you talked about how heart rate trying to control your heart rate is important? Like, is it primarily like going up from like adrenaline, or is it like actually like them getting like worn out and tired? And if it is from that, like, do you do conditioning for that, or how do you control it through that instead of just like mental practice?
So both. So obviously, it's kind of a natural human response to get a bit of an adrenaline rush when you're on something like the roller coaster ride or in a fast car, and that's the same reason why athletes are interested in this, is that adrenaline rush. But the general response would be like, how can you take that adrenaline rush and then control it so that you're not kind of on a fritzy high the whole time with poor reaction times, poor decision making, and an inability to flow kind of with the bike. At the same time, so that can be controlled kind of through breath work, yoga, meditation, and at the same time, their heart rates can get up into the 180 to 200 range depending on their age and if that's an appropriate value. So it is a very physical sport, even though they're not actually doing things like running or jumping. So training for that and bringing that heart rate down, most athletes seem to prefer using other kinds of bikes, be it like BMX, off-roading, or on-roading bikes to kind of simulate. Obviously, you're not going to take a set of handlebars and strap it onto something at the gym just to simulate in competition activities. So yes, to your answer, both of those are important to kind of just dial it back and be in the most relaxed state possible while you're doing this sort of competition.
You typically see with athletes that are wearing helmets, you'll often see head and neck training. Do you think that there's any role for head and neck training with motocross and supercross, or do you not think it's necessary?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's, so with football, you're actually, be that being a helmet sport, you're actually going to be seeing like intentional collision with that area of the body. Now this, it's, I guess, head and neck training would be more of a preventative measure. Should they hit their head on something in a fall or something of that sort. But for the most part, I think if they are developing strong core, being just kind of like core meaning anywhere in like the thorax kind of region of the athlete, if they're developing strong body control over that and they know how to handle themselves when they get weights and forces far away from themselves, such as in full extension, full range of motion away from them, if they can handle themselves in there, I think that would almost take care of that aspect, that they wouldn't have to specifically seek out, how am I going to train my neck to prepare for the season.
So you talked about like force, like impact absorption. How much does the bike absorb versus like how much is actually like is an impact on their body, like when coming off of the jumpers?
So I don't have specific numbers on that. One, it's going to depend on the surface they're on, and it may seem kind of like nerdy to get into what kinds of dirts are they riding on this weekend, what's the hydration status of the soil, what are the hill heights, and that's kind of what's interesting about this sport, is there's so much variation in course to course that you're going to see. So that's going to play a factor. Another factor is going to be what size of bike are they using. So from what I understand, I think there's about 2 main sizes. And the bigger bikes, obviously the bigger the implement, the harder it's going to be to control. So that's going to be generating more forces, especially the bigger, faster, higher the jumps are, the more you're putting in, the more you have to take out with your body. So that is, again, that's going to be another source of increased forces. And then just generally like the size of the athlete. Is it a big male or female who can handle that fairly easily on their skeleton with their muscle tone and just general size? Or are they a smaller person who's going to have to either think about putting on weight to kind of help distribute that, or picking a smaller bike? And that's something that, when a lot of us, I think especially masculine dominant people, will think like, I want the biggest bike that you can give me because I think I can handle it. Well, it's not necessarily the most practical idea, either based on forces that you're not ready to absorb yet, or just the fact that you're not, really in tune with how to control it and how to be efficient with your movements on the bike.
You mentioned the body types a little bit and the different bike sizes. Do we see certain like height limits or height minimums even with this, or is it kind of all around the board?
Yeah, I haven't found anything at all really on sizes of athletes. The best idea I can give you is that it's just going to be like a fairly lean frame,
Sure.
Because this is about efficiency. Again, the weight that you are putting on the bike, this is a race at the end. of the day. So, you know, if you're really weighing down whatever implement you're on, carrying you to the finish line, it's going to be disadvantageous. But, you know, you don't really see a very specific body type for something maybe like a gymnast, where it's height and weight restrictions become very, very specific.
Good job. All right.